Hello and welcome to Hilltop Stovetop, the show where we're teaching you how to make great meals in an ordinary kitchen. We've got a couple of cameras going today. We've got Facebook Live, but we also have the cameras going for the YouTube video, which will be posted in 2 or 3 days after the Facebook Live. Today we are doing a very special meal. We are doing that classic homemade macaroni and cheese. And this is a special request for my friend Pauline in New Jersey. Hi, Pauline. Pauline is the one who gave me this great apron so everybody knows it's Hilltop Stovetop. And she's also gave me these little maison place bowls, so we can have all of our ingredients ready. Now, classic macaroni and cheese is you start with a white sauce, as my grandmother would call it, or a bechamel sauce if you're going to be fancy. The difference with the bechamel sauce is it's got a little bit more flavorings than my grandmother's basic white sauce. But first and foremost, we need to get our macaroni cooking. So I have here just a little, a little under 2 cups of uncooked macaroni. Macaroni is going to double in volume when we cook it. So I've got a nice pot of boiling water, and it really is boiling this time. It's not just pretend like it was when I was cooking the potatoes. So we're going to dump that in there and give it a little stir. We got a pretty big pot for a little amount of macaroni, but that was the one that I had out. And then I'm going to set my timer for 9 minutes. And while that is cooking, we're going to start with the sauce. So any white sauce, bechamel sauce is basically butter, flour, and milk. It's a great sauce to know how to make because it's not only the base for these cream sauces and cheese sauces, but if you add extra milk to it, it becomes the base for a cream soup type of thing. So we're going to start off by melting some butter. Now, normally what you would do is you would melt the butter and add the flour to it and then right away add the milk. But what I like to do is I have to cook the onions anyway ahead of time, so I'm going to add that in with the butter. Now, this is half an onion diced finely, so we'll just dump that in with the butter. And we're not going to caramelize them, but we are going to cook them enough that it is that they're starting to turn translucent. And we'll come in for some close-up shots. And you'll notice that the amount of butter that I put in and the amount of flour that I put are about equal. And the volumes that you use for this is going to depend on the size of the casserole container that you have. In this case, I've chosen a fairly small casserole. There's only 3 of us for dinner, so this is going to be enough. But the bigger the group, the bigger the casserole, the more macaroni, and so on. And I think I'm going to take the lid off of this before it takes off on us. There we go. And so for those of you that were watching at the beginning, there would have been a shot that Margaret had on the Facebook Live, which was the finished product. Same sort of thing we're doing here, except instead of macaroni, we used cauliflower. And that makes it a little bit more palatable if you are trying to stick to a keto diet. There still will be flour in it. If gluten was an issue for you, or flour in general, you could switch to potato flour or something like that instead of the wheat flour. So we've got our butter melted, we've got our onions almost cooked, but while we're waiting for that, we'll go over the other ingredients. We've got, of course, milk here. I've got about 1.5 cups of milk for the amount that I'm doing here. And then the cheeses, I've got a little bit of cream cheese, and then I've got about 2 cups of shredded. It's a combination of mozzarella and cheddar here. You can use any kind of cheese you want, and you can put as much or as little cheese in it as you want. I'm adding some cooked bacon. It's also really good if you've got some leftover chicken, or if you want to throw in a can of tuna. Just whatever strikes your fancy, or if you want just plain macaroni and cheese, that's fine too. Or you can add a few vegetables. And then for the topping, we've got soda crackers and some melted butter. So that's looking pretty good for our onion and butter mixture. And now I'm going to quickly add in the flour. And you'll see right away that starts to mix in with the butter. And by mixing it with the butter, that's what's keeping, otherwise if you just put the flour straight into the milk, you'd be inclined to get lumps. But before that cooks too much, I am going to add a little bit of the milk and mix it in. And keeping it mixing before it's cooked is what keeps it from getting lumps in it as well. And I'm adding it a bit at a time so I've got a chance to mix things in. Now, of course, the onions make it a little bit lumpy, but the sauce itself is very smooth. And then I can add in the rest of this. And with flour type mixtures, once it reaches a boiling point, it's cooked. If you're somebody that would normally uses cornstarch or things to thicken things, which wouldn't work in this kind of case, I don't think, but that you have to cook a little bit longer. So we're going to just mix that up. Now, while that is simmering a bit and thickening, we're going to add some spices. I'm going to add a little bit of cayenne pepper. I find when I'm doing a cheese type dish, a little cayenne is a nice mix, but go gently on it. It is one of those things that a little goes a long way, but we want a good bit of salt in this. And regular black pepper. And if I start to sneeze, you'll forgive me here. There. Let's give this all a little zip. The onions give it a little hint of sweetness, but then you need some oomph to counteract the cheese. And let's just see, how are we on our time for we got 3 minutes left to go for the macaroni to be cooked. I'm going to give that a stir so it doesn't stick to the bottom of the pot. There we go. Now I'm going to add in the cream cheese. Now this is the part that, this is going to take a little bit longer to melt than the other cheese, so we're going to put that in first and let it go until it's smooth. Cream cheese is just an optional thing. Like I said, you have your pick of the kind of cheeses you want. It's a great way to use up leftover little bits of cheese. You know, like say you've had a party and there's all those ends of cheese from the cheese plate. You can fling them all in. I've done this where it was like there was the office party where there was all the pre-cut cheese, and you think it's such a waste to, and it kind of dries out sometimes. But once you put it in the cream sauce and melt it down, it's absolutely fine for something like macaroni and cheese. And you could even throw it in the freezer the day after the day of the party. And to make your macaroni and cheese at a later time. So right now, I give it a couple more stirs and that cream cheese will be mixed in there. And then the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add the bacon next. And the reason I'm doing it that way is once we add the other cheese, it's going to be very, very thick. And it's going to be tougher to get that evenly distributed throughout the sauce. One more little stir here. And then we're going to add in the rest of our shredded cheese. Now, if you put in just macaroni with shredded cheese, you end up with something that is kind of dry. So adding in this, or starting it off with a cream sauce, is what's going to make it smooth and bubbly. There you go. So it's nice and thick. Oh, doesn't that look delicious? And there's our 9 minutes. Okay, so that should mean that our pasta is ready. So we'll turn that off. We'll turn the sauce off. Give it one more stir before I abandon it. And then the other thing that I'm going to do is just take a quick, have my assistant hand me a cup from behind her. Yeah. And I'm just going to take a little dipper of this pasta sauce. Because when I put this together, if this sauce is a little bit too thick for this pasta, having this water will be something that I can thin it down and make it a little more manageable. And it still keeps that flavor of the pasta. So again, I'm going to turn my back to you while I pour this out. So now we've got just the plain macaroni. We'll take this sauce here and pour that in. I'm pouring it into the bigger pot so I've got the room to stir it around. And of course you want to get good to the last drop. Now, before I put this into the baking dish, I'm going to take a little spoon and just have a taste so that the consistency looks pretty good. I won't need that extra pasta water, but if I'd thrown it out, it would have been too late to get it back. So I'm just going to have a little taste here. I think I got it right this time. You want to do that to make sure particularly that you've got the right amount of salt, because this could be kind of bland if you didn't do that. And then we're going to take our little serving dish or casserole dish. Now, if you have a little bit too much, don't worry, you can always put that into another little side dish and have it for a single serving later on. I don't want to fill it too full because otherwise that's going to get, it will spill over in the oven. And now we're going to make our topping. And that is just basically saltine crackers and some melted butter, which is not quite so melted anymore, but it's still good enough. Now here's your trick. Watch this carefully. I actually cut the sleeve in half. For a small size like this, a half a sleeve is enough. If I was making a big casserole, I'd use the whole sleeve. I've left it all sealed in there, and I'm just going to put my hand flat over the opening and crush it down like that. And then when I lift it up, it fits into a little bit smaller container. We can open up the bottom a little bit and squish it down a little bit more. And then we're going to squish it a second time. And there we go. Perfect little saltine crumbs for that butter. And I'm going to mix that up with a fork and get the butter all over the saltines. And if you didn't put the butter in it, not only would it be kind of dry and boring, but it wouldn't brown as nicely on the top. So then we're just going to sprinkle that over the top. Now, if you happen to have saltines that weren't in the sleeve anymore, or somebody put them in a cookie jar or whatever, you can do them up with a rolling pin and put them in a plastic bag and roll it with a rolling pin. But that's one less dish I have to wash and one less piece of equipment I have to take out. Okay, so there it is. Now what we're going to do is pop this in a 350-degree Fahrenheit oven for about 10 minutes, but watch it really closely because it'll sit there for the longest time and not look any different, and then all of a sudden it will turn. So when you get to about that 10-minute mark, be checking it really carefully. And then at the end of the 10 minutes, what we end up with is something that looks like this. Except this one is cauliflower and this one is macaroni. So there you have it. Classic macaroni and cheese. And feel free to add your own little twists for additional ingredients. But there it is. So thank you for joining us at Hilltop Stovetop. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube so you don't miss any of our future episodes. And if there is something that you would like me to try to demonstrate, you go ahead and put something in the comments on YouTube, and we try to accommodate as best we can. And happy birthday, Pauline. Bye.